My friend asked me to make him a box beam mantle for his fireplace, so I used SketchUp to come up with this design. Basically a cantilever support structure inside of the box beam with mitered top, bottom, front, and sides. And after I did a lot of work on the warped boards to get them as flat as I could, I learned my first lesson. Your planer will snipe. So after I stained the boards, I noticed that each board at the ends had some kind of artifact caused by engaging one of the two rollers in the planer, and had to come up with an approach to address this. So I basically put the boards back through the planer, took off all the stain, and addressed the snipe with a header and footer board so that a different board would take the snipe before the rollers were both engaged. And that required a lot of new sanding, but I came up with the finished product that looked pretty good and really didn't have much snipe. Even the little snipe I had could be sanded off. So I started with these boards and began my cuts. This was over a 78-inch board, and I came up with the solution that a track saw was the best approach to cut a 45-degree miter in the edge of the boards. And for most of the times it worked just fine. On my fourth cut, I got distracted with the dust chute shooting at the camera and stopped paying attention to exactly what was happening with the track, and you can see me accidentally lift it up, which caused error in the cut and to gouge the board that I was cutting and my track, which was horrible. On my fourth cut of a 45-degree miter, I made this mistake. The board was not tight to the track, which was my fault with the clamps, and as I went down the board I noticed that the board actually moved, and so I should have done a better job clamping this 4-inch board, even though it had a longer board next to it, was not tight to that board and became misaligned. So after making those two mistakes, the track saw tipping and then the board moving underneath the track, I decided to make the side miter cuts with my miter saw. Then I learned another lesson, that my miter saw didn't exactly cut square, probably due to the board not being aligned to the saw correctly. So this is how I set it up, and I thought it worked well, but I had to take my track saw to the ends, as you can see the misalignment, if you can see the boards peeking out under the track, and recut them, and the end result turned out really good. So here's the end result of the long cut. See a little bit of a warp in the board, and then the overall shot of the lumber that I used to assemble. And when I was cutting a biscuit slot in the end of the sides of the mantle, I made this mistake and was focused on the wrong thing, and the biscuit slot went all the way through the board, and I had to shorten the entire length of the project. Glue up is always one of the more stressful parts of a project, and this was no exception. But I spread out the glue like I normally do and was able to fold the pieces up like I had watched in many YouTube videos, and got something that generally I thought looked pretty good. I used my brad nailer to attach the top and bottom to the front face. I didn't want to put any marks at all on the front or the sides of the piece. Then after a little bit of glue cleanup, I attached the sides to the piece and again used the brad nailer on the top and the bottom. Then I moved it to the clamps and did a little bit more cleanup, and I was ready to address my next two lessons learned. So in the most pragmatic way possible, I learned why you don't stain a project before you assemble it, because you need to fix mistakes, and when you stain a project, it limits what you can do. So after consulting with a friend, I realized that you could put veneers in the gaps and fill them in quite nicely, in fact, and then just restain your project. And after using a long cylindrical screwdriver to burnish the edges and close up the gaps, I had this for my completed project. Mounting the project had its own lessons learned, and we noticed the support structure had a slight tilt to it and the shelf wasn't flat, so we used some shims to shim it up, and with a countersunk hole underneath to hold it to the wall. we ended up with a very level mantle that looked just beautiful.